The absolute dismantling of executive privilege architecture isn't happening in a quiet legal library. It is detonating in a Florida courtroom, with implications that threaten to destabilize the very foundation of post-presidential accountability. Despite Judge Aileen Cannon's unprecedented maneuver to dismiss the classified documents case and effectively bar the public release of Special Counsel Jack Smith's deeply anticipated report, an entirely separate and unstoppable chain reaction was triggered when previously sealed grand jury files were thrust into the public domain. We are witnessing the systemic collapse of a containment strategy that has dominated global headlines for months, catalyzed when a federal judge mandated the unsealing of sworn, closed-door testimony from Donald Trump's most trusted inner circle, turning a closely guarded legal fortress into a public spectacle. This wasn't a sudden, unprompted catastrophe, but rather the devastating culmination of a methodical prosecutorial operation, intersecting with a catastrophic miscalculation by a defense team that arrogantly believed they could eternally suppress evidence obtained through the crime-fraud exception. Because former attorneys were legally compelled to testify about highly confidential discussions regarding classified intelligence, the core bedrock of the defense, the carefully curated illusion of mere administrative sloppiness or procedural misunderstanding was utterly and irrevocably annihilated. The freshly unsealed documents exposed exactly what the former president knew about the retention of highly sensitive national security secrets, establishing a rigid timeline that definitively shatters the narrative of innocent miscommunication by revealing deliberate decisions to retain materials. The geopolitical, economic, and domestic policy ramifications of this exposure are undeniably staggering, completely altering the leverage dynamics for a figure who is paradoxically attempting to navigate complex international relations and aggressive domestic policy agendas while simultaneously fighting a thermonuclear legal battle. When global allies and opportunistic adversaries watch a high-profile defense team physically melt down into outright chaos, abandoning all professional composure to scream at a federal judge while their strategy burns in real time, they aren't just passively consuming legal drama. They are actively calculating the profound vulnerability of the American executive apparatus. This unprecedented spectacle radically alters the international diplomatic calculus, as foreign intelligence agencies observe, that America's most sensitive compartmentalized information, including closely guarded details about nuclear capabilities and clandestine intelligence gathering methods, was reportedly handled with such egregious negligence that even the president's closest advisors felt compelled to turn against him under penalty of perjury. From an economic standpoint, global markets fundamentally detest institutional instability, and the viral visual of an administration deeply engulfed in an existential legal crisis creates a massive risk premium on American institutional reliability amidst broader economic challenges. This perception of systemic chaos threatens to chill long-term foreign direct investment, which heavily relies on the predictable execution of governance and the absolute security of intellectual and state secrets. Furthermore, the sheer gravity of this situation forces a complete reevaluation of second-order effects, particularly how future administrations will inevitably weaponize these judicial precedents to aggressively target political rivals, creating a doom loop of retaliatory litigation that could paralyze the legislative and executive branches for decades. The unsealed files do not just represent a singular legal defeat, they signify the permanent evaporation of the informational control that once insulated the highest office from raw, unfiltered accountability. We must also critically examine the broader societal mechanics at play here, where the viral dissemination of this courtroom implosion, generating millions of views across digital platforms in mere hours, bypasses traditional media gatekeepers and mainline's institutional panic directly into the public consciousness. This democratization of legal catastrophe means that complex arguments over federal records law are suddenly replaced by the visceral, unspinnable imagery of legal professionals scrambling frantically in a desperate attempt to de-escalate a catastrophic strategic failure. For investors heavily indexing their portfolios on geopolitical stability, this continuous broadcast of domestic turmoil signals a stark warning that the American political apparatus is dangerously distracted, shifting focus away from urgent macroeconomic policies and critical foreign trade negotiations toward desperate measures of legal self-preservation. Ultimately, the release of these sealed files acts as an irreversible paradigm shift. You cannot force a global audience to unsee the sworn admissions of a president's inner circle, nor can you restore the geopolitical deterrence that dissipates when a superpower's internal governance is revealed to be this wildly chaotic. The real risk lies in how key players respond. Will this historic level of judicial transparency force the rapid implementation of stringent, unbreachable legislative guardrails regarding executive intelligence handling, or will it merely be metabolized by an already fractured electorate as just another partisan cudgel, further eroding the foundational legitimacy of the justice system itself? As the application of the crime-fraud exception dramatically pierces the sacred veil of attorney-client privilege, at the absolute apex of government power, effectively weaponizing a client's own legal counsel against them, we are forced to confront an existential institutional dilemma. How will this unprecedented exposure of executive vulnerability fundamentally rewrite the legal boundaries and national security protocols of presidential power for all generations to come?